Welcome to episode 5 of Eerie Confessions. Story 1. The dimly lit coffee shop seemed like the perfect setting for my Tinder date with Emily. We had connected over shared interests and a love for all things mysterious. As I approached our chosen meeting spot, my heart raced with anticipation. Emily sat near the back, her eyes fixed on her phone. When she looked up and saw me, a smile stretched across her face. Her appearance matched the pictures on her profile, a cascade of red hair and an air of mystery that drew me in. We exchanged pleasantries, and soon we found ourselves engrossed in conversation. As the evening progressed, Emily suggested we visit an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The place had a dark history, and she claimed to be fascinated by its eerie allure. Intrigued, I agreed, thinking it would add a thrilling twist to our date. As we approached the mansion, a chilling wind whispered through the overgrown trees. The moon cast long shadows that danced across the decaying facade. Emily seemed undeterred, leading the way with a confident stride. The air inside the mansion was thick with silence, broken only by the creaking of floorboards beneath our feet. Suddenly, Emily stopped and turned to face me. Her eyes, once warm, now held a cold intensity. "Have you ever experienced something truly supernatural?" she asked, her voice low and haunting. Without waiting for my response, she began recounting tales of the mansion's dark past, tales of tormented souls and unexplainable phenomena. As we explored the desolate rooms, a feeling of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The atmosphere grew tense, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Emily's stories took on a darker edge. In one room, she pointed to a faded portrait on the wall. "This is the ghost they say haunts these halls," she whispered. Just as I stared at the portrait, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I could almost feel a presence, and a flickering candle cast eerie shadows on the walls. Emily suggested we try to communicate with the other side using an old Ouija board she had brought. Despite feeling unease, I agreed, trying to show off my manly courage. As we placed our hands on the planchette, a chill ran down my spine. The planchette moved, spelling out messages that sent shivers through me. Just as the tension reached its peak, the sound of footsteps echoed through the mansion. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone. Emily's confident demeanor faltered, and we clung to each other in the darkness, straining to hear the approaching footsteps. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a caretaker who had heard rumors of trespassers. Relief washed over us as the caretaker escorted us out. Emily apologized, claiming she had no idea the mansion was still being watched. As we left the property, I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered behind us. Emily's demeanor had shifted, leaving me to question the authenticity of the night's events. Was it a carefully orchestrated scare, or had we truly encountered something supernatural? In the days following our encounter at the abandoned mansion, Emily and I found ourselves caught in a strange limbo. The intensity of that night lingered in the air whenever we spoke, adding an unspoken layer of tension to our budding relationship. At first, we both tried to brush off the events as a spooky adventure gone awry. We joked about our shared misadventure, blaming it on the caretaker and the creaky old mansion. Yet, beneath the surface, there was an unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted between us. As our conversations continued, I noticed a change in Emily's demeanor. She became more elusive, avoiding discussions about the supernatural or our night at the mansion. It was as if she wanted to distance herself from the unsettling experience, and in doing so, she distanced herself from me as well. Our subsequent dates lacked the initial spark we had shared. The energy that had drawn us together was replaced by a lingering unease. Emily's messages became sporadic, and she seemed preoccupied with something I couldn't quite grasp. It was clear that the events of that night had cast a shadow over our budding connection. One day, I mustered the courage to confront Emily about the changes in our dynamic. As we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, she hesitated before finally admitting that the haunted mansion had affected her more deeply than she had initially let on. She confessed to having recurring nightmares and a growing fear that something had attached itself to her. I tried to reassure her, suggesting that seeking professional help might be a good idea, but Emily remained distant. It became apparent that the spooky date had taken a toll on her. In the end, Emily decided it was best for both of us to part ways. Story 2. The first time I saw Adam's profile on Tinder, I couldn't help but be drawn to the confident grin in his profile picture. The messages we exchanged were light, filled with shared interests and witty banter. It wasn't long before we decided to meet for a casual dinner at a charming local restaurant. Our first date was promising, filled with laughter and easy conversation. Adam seemed like the perfect gentleman, holding doors open and insisting on paying the bill. As the weeks went by, our connection deepened, and we found ourselves spending more and more time together. It was then that I began to notice subtle signs of possessiveness. At first, it was innocent enough. He'd express concern about me going out with friends without him or question the time I spent at work. It seemed like normal relationship stuff, a sign that he cared. But as our relationship progressed, so did his possessive behavior. One evening, we were having a quiet dinner at his place when he casually mentioned a dream he had. In vivid detail, he described a scenario where he and I were inseparable, our lives entwined in a way that transcended the boundaries of reality. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I dismissed it as a quirk, a peculiar manifestation of his affection. As the weeks turned into months, Adam's possessiveness intensified. He wanted to know my every move, and any attempt to assert my independence was met with a sulking silence that hung heavy in the air. I felt like I was tiptoeing through a relationship minefield, careful not to trigger another bout of insecurity. One day, as I was scrolling through my social media, I noticed that Adam had been liking and commenting on every post, even those from years before we met. It was as if he was trying to rewrite my past, erasing any trace of a life before him. The psychological horror of the situation began to settle in, the feeling of being watched, monitored, and controlled. The turning point came when Adam surprised me with a gift, a vintage locket containing a picture of us. It was a beautiful gesture, but as he clasped it around my neck, his eyes gleamed with an unsettling possessiveness. That night, I dreamt of the locket tightening around my throat, a symbolic representation of the suffocating grip our relationship had become. Determined to salvage what was left of my independence, I decided to have an open conversation with Adam. I gently expressed my concerns about his possessive behavior, hoping he would understand and make an effort to change. Instead, his reaction was explosive. He accused me of not appreciating his love, of trying to distance myself from the intense connection we shared. I became afraid as he raged about how I was ungrateful for the effort he had invested in our relationship. In a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our connection, Adam suggested a weekend getaway to a forest homestay. I hesitated, the warning bells in my mind clanging with urgency. But he pleaded, promising that it would be a chance for us to reconnect away from the pressures of daily life. As we drove deeper into the forest, the feeling of being isolated in me grew stronger. The cabin, surrounded by towering trees and the haunting silence of the woods, felt like a trap closing in. The creepiness I felt reached its peak when Adam revealed a room in the cabin filled with pictures of us, meticulously arranged in a timeline that chronicled our relationship. Well, under normal circumstances, my loved one showing me a timeline of our love life should be a very romantic occasion, but given his possessiveness, this gave me the creeps instead. With every passing hour, Adam's behavior became more erratic. He spoke of a future where we would be forever bound, his possessiveness transforming into a madness that echoed through the confined space of the cabin. It was then that I realized the depth of his obsession. The room felt like a shrine, a testament to a love that had mutated into something grotesque. Panic surged through me as I confronted the horrifying reality. I was entangled in a web of possessiveness that transcended the boundaries of sanity. I couldn't take it anymore. I fled the cabin, leaving behind the echoes of Adam's pleas. I was glad I never decided to move in and stay with him throughout our dating phase. Also, I should count myself lucky that he knew when to give up and didn't turn into the stalker I've heard in many horror dating stories. However, it took a while for me to recover from the situation before gaining the courage to get back into the dating scene. Story 3. The allure of online dating led me to a Tinder match named Alex. From the outset, our interactions were marked by shared laughter and seemingly common interests. The first few dates were promising. Alex appeared charming, attentive, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. As the initial excitement of a budding romance settled, subtle signs of possessiveness emerged. Innocent inquiries about my plans turned into a relentless need for constant updates. The once charming gaze transformed into an unnerving intensity that made me squirm in my seat. I brushed off the discomfort, chalking it up to newfound feelings and the inevitable quirks of any relationship. It wasn't until our fourth date that the situation escalated. Alex's possessive behavior became increasingly evident. He would show up unannounced at my workplace, claiming he was just in the neighborhood. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages, each one demanding immediate responses, as if my every move required his approval. Feeling suffocated, I confided in my closest friends. Their concern mirrored my growing unease. They encouraged me to take action before the situation spiraled out of control. Reluctantly, I decided to involve law enforcement. The police, after listening to my account of the escalating harassment, revealed that Alex had a history of such behavior. It turned out he had a restraining order filed against him by a previous victim. The realization sent shivers down my spine. I had unknowingly walked into the clutches of someone with a dark and disturbing past. Determined to protect myself, I followed the advice of law enforcement. They helped me secure a restraining order against Alex, and for a brief period, the storm seemed to abate. However, the horror wasn't over. One evening a month later, as I returned home, I found a chilling message scrawled on my doorstep in what appeared to be blood-red paint. "You can't escape me." Panic set in as the first thing that came to mind was Alex. It seemed Alex had found a way to circumvent the legal barriers meant to keep him at bay. The police, this time armed with a search warrant, discovered a hidden cache of photographs and personal items belonging to me. Alex had been surveilling my every move, capturing moments when I least expected it. The invasion of my privacy reached new depths, and the realization that he had been lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting, sent a shiver down my spine. Haunted by the threat, I sought refuge with friends and changed my routine in a desperate attempt to elude Alex's relentless pursuit. Then, one night, he brazenly confronted me outside the apartment building. The chilling familiarity in his eyes suggested an unyielding determination to possess me at any cost. Summoning all the strength I had left, I screamed for help. My friends, alerted by the commotion, rushed to my side. The confrontation turned physical, with police arriving just in time to apprehend Alex. That was the last time I've heard of or seen him. It was tough recovering from this trauma, but I eventually managed to return to normal life.